It's been he's helped me learn to challenge bouncees because he's challenged me very well, unfortunately. And he took away all my toys, all of my ability to manipulate people and hurt people, and then beats me up with my own words. And I think it's Stockholm syndrome. I think that's the, I get put, it puts the meditation on its skin, or else it gets the hose again, yeah, come on up here, Joe.
Thank you, I love you. Wow. Hello there. My name is Joe McF, and I'm a very grateful alcoholic. Hey, and because of the loving grace of God that I was afraid to believe in and was hoping would never find me, I haven't found it necessary to face life nor escape life since June 14th, 1993. And for that, I owe you all my life. And I have to tell you, I'm somewhat humbled being here. This is sort of like the Mecca of recovery, not just this place, the Outpost, but this part of the country. You'd have to go to Peru to, McF, or you go to Sedona, or you go to Shasta. And I've never spoke at Peru, but I've spoken at all of those places. And then over in England, there's a place in Sonora, Arizona. There is a spiritual vortex, they say, where the energy comes out. And Kerrville, Texas has to be one of them. And I'm just humbled. I woke up this morning with tears in my eyes thinking about the miracle that transpired in my life. And I want you to know before I get started that if you look at me, I want you to know that I am not indicative of the person that walked into Alcoholics Anonymous June 14, 1993. At that time, I was 370 pounds. I was awarded the state of Texas MHMR, and for those of you that don't know, it stands for mental health, mental retardation. I was on SSI receiving $384 a month. I was court-ordered to take 14 pills a day to sedate the intensity of my emotions. I was talking to myself. You could smell the medication coming out of my pores. I would walk into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and walk out, and I couldn't tell you who shared, what the topic was, or anything. And I had absolutely no hope. Well, last time I was in the state hospital, I took 38 Xanax, drank a half a gallon of Reuniti, called the prayer hotline and told them I was going to come back to the Ellis Island of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is Club 12 in San Antonio. And I was going to haunt the old timers because they'd never read that part of the big book that says love and tolerance of others is our code. And I woke up and I found out that I took 38 Xanax, drank a half a gallon of Reuniti, and slit my left wrist. And I woke up and I was in the Bexar County Hospital. And no big deal, I'd done that before, but I said, Jesus, you cannot be any bigger loser than that. You try to commit suicide and you can't even do that. And what I did is I ripped the hoses out of my mouth, out of my body, the IVs, the EKGs, and I jumped out the window to my death, but I was on the very first floor. And so this time they took me back in a straitjacket, strapped down in a gurney, put me in the back of a padded van, and took me back to the San Antonio State Hospital. And this was what I hoped to be the very last time. I was there for 81 days. This time I wasn't in Goins Hall. Goins Hall is the alcohol unit. This time I was in Bowie Hall, and that is the lockdown ward where you're in the caged unit where you are never getting out. And there I was, 81 days, 37 shock treatments. And I would beg them to give me a whole bunch more shock treatment because I'm the kind of person that Alcoholics Anonymous would not work for. And so this is the person that came into the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous 33 years ago, over 33 years ago. And so I don't want you to think that the person that is up here today is any different than maybe anyone that you feel you may be. because God won't do one thing for anybody in Alcoholics Anonymous, he won't do for everybody. Bill Wilson used to have meetings at 182 Clinton Street in New York, and someone who didn't show up, he died of Korsakoff syndrome. That's alcoholic wet brain in St. Elizabeth's Hospital. His name happened to be Joe, coincidentally. And he started the New Yorker magazine. He didn't show up for 2 meetings in a week, and they asked him on the 3rd week, where was Joe? And Bill said he slipped. And at that point in AA history, no one had ever heard of the word slip. They said, Bill, what do you mean slip? We don't get it. He said he slipped from the grace of God. You see, AA cannot, will not, never has, never will, and is absolutely impossible to fail for anyone who sincerely takes all 12 steps. Now, in 2009, I wrote a 26-page white paper with a man, God rest his soul, named Sandy Beach. He was a lobbyist, a Yale graduate, and a very, very, very dear friend. We'd go to meetings at the U.S. Capitol in the War Room on Tuesday mornings. It was called the Yays and Nays meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he was very, very gifted. And there were some things going on in Alcoholics Anonymous, much not too dissimilar with the things that are going on now in New York. And we wrote a 26-page white paper on the word God, where we don't need to water down our literature, we need to do our literature. And the thesis of that, all 26 pages, could be boiled down to this. If there's anyone here today that has a problem with God, the power of God runs deep, the big book tells us. It says, no one need have problem with the word God in Alcoholics Anonymous. In all of Alcoholics Anonymous history, the word God simply refers to the individual transformation that transpires within anyone who sincerely takes all 12 steps. So God will not, cannot, never has, and never will let you down. Your Heavenly Father, as it tells us on page 181 by Dr. Bob, your Heavenly Father will never let you down. Indeed, my whole talk today that I hope to give could be condensed down to this, is there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him between the claps now. Now, what is now? It's the new opportunity window. You can be busted, disgusted, not to be trusted. You can be rode hard, put up wet. It doesn't matter what you are. In fact, our good friend who just would have celebrated 63 years sober if he wouldn't have passed, Hal Looney in West Texas, a West Texas legend. He used to have a saying, and if you're new here today, I'd like to just recite it for you. It doesn't matter what you've done or where you've been. It's what you're doing today that matters. Now come on in. This is a show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. And my invitation to you, quite simply today, is this. Jump on in all the way, foot first, feet first. AA is here, and your miracle is here. And I'm telling you, grab for it, grab it, work for it. Build your life around AA, not AA around your life. You got a wonderful life. And us old timers, when we see you guys coming in here, we just get to salivate, because we get to see a miracle getting ready, like our beautiful Ethan here. He used to look like a hippie and all this stuff, and look at him now. And the other thing is, when I came in, I couldn't read. I was so heavily medicated. I'd been blackballed from many AA clubs for fist fighting. I went in there glassy-eyed and stoned. I was trying to pick up the girls from Alpha House. And I didn't want what you had except for the women. And an old-timer grabbed me and he says, listen, I'll shoot you. You may weigh 370 pounds and be crazy, but I'll tell you what you are. I ain't scared of you. I've been in prison. I see what scary people are. I'll tell you what you are. You are an emotional you-know-what. It started with a P. And he says, you mess with me, I'll shoot you. He says, I'll tell you what you are. You're scared. You see, boys blame, children explain, men change. What you going to do with your life, boy? AA is full of, you can snow the snowman, but you can't shit the shitter. And AA is full of world-class shitters and world-class problem solvers. Why don't you tell us what's really going on? And for 13 years, I went in and out, in and out, in and out, and in and out, and could not get sober. Did not want to get sober, because I know you guys were talking about the J-man, Jesus. And I knew that when I hit puberty, the things I devoted the rest of my life to, and then with drugs and alcohol, if there was, he's going to be mad at me. And so the person that's here today talking, I just want you to know, is not indicative and representative, because sometimes you'll see people in Alcoholics Anonymous and you'll say, there's no way. There's just no way. There's just no way. I got a very dear friend. He brings a picture of him, and you can't believe it. And I have pictures of me before and after. And I want to get to some of the good things that this program has brought to me. And if God has done something like this for a loser like me, what can he do for geniuses like y'all? I mean, seriously. And the other thing is, I'd just like to say, it's so important. We come in here, and the newcomers, when you walk in, you're saying, oh my God, I'm not like those people. They have insurance on their car. They have a car. The car belongs to them. They got a title in the glove box that matches their address on their driver's license and the insurance. My God, how am I ever going to do that? I know where you're at. I know where you're at. You see, in Alcoholics Anonymous, we don't judge where you are or where you think you are by comparing ourselves to other people. The way we judge ourselves is where we were when we came in, busted, disgusted, not to be trusted at our very first meeting, and where we are today. We don't judge ourselves by other people who've had decades to hide and put up facades to keep you from knowing what's really going on. There's a guy named Khalil Gibran, and he wrote a lot of books. He was a mystic. And he wrote something, he said, the first step in unselfishness is going mad. Go mad and come back and tell us all what lies behind that thin veil we all wear called sanity. Now, if you look up the word mask, and then you look up the word in Appendix 2, it says spiritual experience, a profound alteration to your reaction to life, a personality change sufficient enough to overcome alcoholism. Quite often, others see it in the newcomer before they themselves do. If you were to look up that word mask, it comes from, the etymology of it is in Greek, and it goes to persona. And where that word came from is they didn't have changing rooms and lights and curtains and all that. They would have a big coliseum, and the actors would be there. And they would be talking and playing one character, and then they'd take that mask off and put on another one. You see, today, and what is a spiritual experience? It's a personality change, that mask, personality, persona. Today, if you were to see me in a boardroom in Midland, Texas, or you were to see me at the bank with one of our bankers or with one of our lawyers for our companies, or you would see me teaching my grandchildren new fart jokes and watching midget wrestling videos, you're going to see a guy who's intimate, transparent, and vulnerable. And I learned how to do that with y'all. You know, the Statue of Liberty, which I secretly believe we should have one on top of Club 12, the Ellis Island of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it would be that of Bill Wilson in a flowing white robe holding up a first edition big book that says, "Bring us your wretched refuse." Because that's what we open the doors up for, and that's what we want. I've never in my life been invited anywhere on the days that I hit bottom, except for Alcoholics Anonymous. Come in here, take your mask off. And the definition that works so well with me, Clancy gave this to me, and it's been, he said I have to give him credit, God rest his soul, the first 3 times, and it's probably been 3,000 times that I've shared this. He said the definition of a sponsor that is the greatest he's ever heard is a sponsor is someone you share your secret disbeliefs with. And you see, my secret disbelief is I was unlovable, that I was a mistake and I didn't belong, that I was weird, that I was different, and that I was unique. And little did I know those feelings of always my whole life feeling that I was outside, weird, different, and unique, are the very feelings that make me not weird, different, and unique and make me fit into Alcoholics Anonymous. So I'd encourage y'all just to come in here, sit down, and just share who you are, because we know who you are. And we hold you in that sacred place. And we just welcome you. We love planting the seeds of God's power in you and watching them come to fruition. But you have to put yourself in a position to receive that grace, just like so many of us have. The other thing is, and I keep saying the other thing, I think I need a new transition, is I'm going to be speaking at the New York State Convention in September. And there was a girl up here that was a dancer, not a ballet dancer. And she was in a halfway house here. And she came from a good family, and she really embarrassed them. And she came to meetings here. She came to meetings all over. And she put herself in a position for that grace of God. And little by little, she went back to junior college. Little by little, she went back. And she got a PhD, in which, as a sidebar, I want you to know I have a PhD now. And I walked in with a PhD, and I didn't know I had it. I'm a poor, helpless drunk PhD. But she got a PhD. Living in halfway houses here. You see, there's in AA literature, we've got Chris and I were talking about some friends of ours who are historians, phenomenal historians on AA literature. And one of the things they say is, from this shredding thread, our destiny hung. And she and I, from these bottoms, will be the Friday night and Saturday night speaker at the New York State Convention. So the people I'm pitching to is this: which one of you are going to be filling our shoes? No one that's alive today will know anybody that'll be alive in 100 years. I don't know anybody who was alive 100 years before I was born. We've got this chain of Alcoholics Anonymous going on right now, right here. What are you going to do? Children blame, boys explain, men change. What are you going to do at that time? There's so many times we've got some really, really powerful people who have passed from Alcoholics Anonymous here. And I'd like to share a little bit about the history that I found here. And just because sometimes you come in and you acclimate, and they say if you were to put a frog in a boiling pot of water, it would jump right out. But if you put that very same frog in a very same pot and put it on the stove and just slowly turned it up, it would stay in there till it was boiling and never got out. Sometimes we just take for granted where we are, and we don't know what really went on, and all the trouble and all the work and everything that happened to put Alcoholics Anonymous in its place and where it is. From this shredding thread, our destiny hung. I'm thinking of some people, and when I woke up this morning, I was crying. And I got to tell you, since I got sober, I'll cry at a supermarket grand opening. And Lucy looks, oh God, now what? And I was thinking of a very dear friend of mine. He started a treatment center up here. His name was Dr. Gene Seals. And he used to have me speak on his birthdays, and he would come down to Alamo Heights and San Antonio and speak on mine. And he was an incredible man, but he started up here, and he was a friend of Bill Wilson's, and he had Bill Wilson come to the San Antonio State Hospital, my old alma mater. And he would have him share, and I'd drive around with Gene, and he would tell me a lot of things and share a lot of things with me. And I'm just thinking about how he chose in this area, and we're talking about the spiritual vortex that is up here that many people take for granted. Lucy and I just got back from Ireland and France, England, a lot of countries, and Amsterdam. That was a trip. And they're all saying, I love Texas AA. Oh, I love. Do you know the Raymer brothers? Yes, I know them. Oh, sorry. But they do. It's a fact. And so they say, we love it. What is it about this Texas AA? What is it? Well, we got Dr. Gene Seal. Well, when I got sober, my sponsor, by the way, is Jim Willis. His sobriety date is February 6, 1957. He's 95 years old. If he lives to February, and he has every intention to, I talked to him yesterday, to February 6, 2027, he will have 70 years sober. He got his Desire Chip at Club 12 from Bill Wilson after he was sober a few weeks. They told him go up there and get a Desire Chip from Bill. And he doesn't like a lot of people knowing that because he doesn't like the people saying our lineage, because that negates what it says in the big book. We know what you're saying. You may be alone and jittery, but with this book you can replicate it in so many words. It says that. And so he doesn't like that. But so I have a sponsor. I sponsor people. I have a sponsor who knows he's my sponsor. I've shared all my deepest secrets with him, and he keeps me accountable. And Lucy and him have a deal, and I don't know what it is, but every time he gets around her, he says, "You may leave." And then they talk, and I guess I'm doing okay. She hasn't left me yet. And by the way, I don't call her my wife. She is my cherished bride. It's not important for you to know that, but that's important for me to put that out there to the universe. I worship the ground she walks on. She's not my higher power, but I'm going to tell you something. We've got a second tradition in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that is for our group purpose. And we were talking to somebody about, I'm sending him some stuff I wrote on the 12 traditions and the 12 concepts in our practice them in all of our affairs: romance, finance, pissance, home, occupation, and affairs. And what it is she has her program, and she's a whole person. I have my program, or the program, and I'm a whole person. But what is our common welfare? When those two overlap, and that's what we have with the sponsor and sponsee, that overlap there. And the ego is called bloated nothingness. That's what Ernest Holmes, Chuck Chamberlain's sponsor kind of said, is our idea is I get my bloated nothingness out of her way, out of my way of giving and receiving and letting me be. You know that big book, it says, why shouldn't we regard ourselves as spearhead of God's ever-advancing creation? I get my bloated nothingness away, and I prepare, and then I go in, and we sit there, and I listen to God express himself through her to me, and through me to her, and then we have a group conscience. I'm not suggesting you do this, but what we do, she set me straight. She's Al-Anon, and her grand sponsor is a lady named Mary Pearl in Al-Anon, and she sewed up her husband who was drunk and sobering up, and he passed out in the bed. She sewed him up in a sheet and then got a baseball bat and started, all right, now you're going to get sober, you're SOB. So, you got to be careful with that kind of lineage. What we'll have to do is she gets one vote, we have a discussion, I get one vote, we have a discussion, and then she gets the final vote. And it works for us. And so anyway, I'll qualify myself a little bit, and it's so important getting an education and coming here, because Alcoholics Anonymous is where your dreams come true. If I were in the old timers, and there's a lot in the big book, and it's not in the big book, it's not true because it's in the big book. It's in the big book because it's true. We're dealing with spiritual principles. If old timers would say that if you come into Alcoholics Anonymous and you write down everything you'd want, and then look at it several years later, you would have short-sold yourself. And beyond my wildest dreams, that is my experience. And God will not do one thing for anybody in Alcoholics Anonymous He won't do for everybody in Alcoholics Anonymous, because we're dealing with spiritual principles. I took to heart when I read the bottom of page 42 when it said, quite as important is the discovery that spiritual principles will solve all my problems. And let me tell you something, I was a guy with problems. So I'd like to talk about, now I got that out of the way, is, on page 26 and 27, we're talking about Roland Hazard meeting up with Dr. Young. And Roland Hazard was my kind of an alcoholic. He went over to, he come from a very influential family, Eastern blue blood family, and he went over there with his wife, and he convinced Dr. Young, says, I understand what you're saying, but I'm not the one who's an alcoholic, my wife is. Why don't we put her in treatment? And then he goes to Africa on a safari, gets kicked out of, not off the safari, out of the country of Africa, and gets sent back to Zurich and meets with Dr. Young. And he goes in there and he tells Dr. Young what the deal is. And he says, look, I've never been successful with anybody with your degree of alcoholism. I suggest you get back to the Oxford movement and find this. I can't help you. You're beyond the synthetic knowledge. And that's exactly where I was. That's exactly where I was. And I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I knew I was defective. And the reason why, when we're talking about those old ideas, and they're not old ideas if you're still operating under them. And you're coming in here, and this is why it's so important to have a sponsor. A sponsor is someone that you share those secret disbeliefs. It's that third entity of the second tradition where God expresses himself to you through your sponsor. I believe God talks to me through my sponsor, and if you don't believe that, you have the wrong sponsor. Or maybe you need to get tuned in and wrap your head around that and have a talk with him and let him help you understand that, because we're dealing with principles. And so where did I get these old ideas, these attitudes, these beliefs? Well, here's the way it went down for me. I'm a product of a rape, and I'm going to spend about 3 minutes on this. I'm not going to get in. I am not a victim. Although I have to tell you, I really have a leaning. My favorite sport is recreational depression. I love and I speak fluently in Vietnamese. But I'm not going to do that. For about 3 minutes, I'm going to share. My mother was raped when she was 14. I'm a product of a lady that to call her bipolar, God rest her soul, would be an understatement. She was probably octipolar. And she had me, and every time she saw me, I reminded her of that perp, and she hated my guts. And the things that happened to me as a child should never happen to anyone. And I'm not going to get into that. But I am going to say I developed some ideas about who I was, the world that I lived in, and where I fit in it. And if there was a God, where was he that let all these things happen? I stuttered. I went to special education. I cried all the time. I was a sissy. I got beat up all the time. I suffered horrific beatings. That was during the school day, and it got worse when I was at home alone. And I developed, and there's something that psychologists will call the mapping of your brain, where it gets rearranged. And if you have something like that, you don't need to raise your hand or acknowledge it. But if you have that, and that's those secret things that you're keeping on to yourself, you're going to the grave with, those are the things to put out there and let God. Have any of you seen the movie Pulp Fiction? I'll tell you who my higher power that I've come to believe is. You remember Marcellus Wallace, who says we're going to go medieval? That's my higher power. He goes medieval on my defects of character, and I just go give him, and he says, that's okay, Joey. As long as you're willing, we're going to bring out the gimp. And I love it, and it works for me, So when I said that new opportunity window, what is the opportunity? We have those old ideas, beliefs about us, the world we live in. And what is the opportunity? Well, the big book says when trouble, and I relate everything in the big book I believe is true. This one, if I were to doubt any of them, it would be this one. When trouble comes, we cheerfully capitalize on it. I've never cheerfully capitalized on a trouble ever. I'm an awfulizer. It's the worst thing that ever happened to me, God. Why'd you let this? My God, you just had to die on the cross. I got to suffer this. Lucy looked at me wrong when I woke up this morning, And so what I've learned to do is give those to God. And here's how it goes. is when trouble comes, we cheerfully capitalize on it as an opportunity for God to show us his omnipotence. What does that look like? Every morning, before I get up, before I go pee, and that's a big thing when you get to be an old man, I close my eyes and I say, Dear God, this is Joe reporting for duty. Would you please give me more opportunities to be inconvenienced and show me something new that I've been wrong about? I would encourage you not to do that. And as a result of that, he keeps what I've been wrong about. He says, well, Joe, you're a slow learner. In fact, the name of my home group is the Slow Learners Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're slow learners and faster forgetters. We're also pigs, people interested in growing spiritually, P-I-G-S. Where did that come from? I would say, I'm an alcoholic and I'm an addict, and you don't belong in here, you're an all this stuff. I say, well, I threw a curve at those old timers at Club 12. I said, I'm a pig. They go, oh my God, he's off his medicine. He says, what do you mean a pig? I'll shoot it, snort it, sniff it, smoke it, fight it, screw it, or steal it if it'll change the way I feel about me and the world. Do we have any other pigs? Yeah. That doesn't bode well. So what is the purpose of being a pig? Is to get people through the steps so that they can become hogs. What are hogs? H-O-G-S, helping others grow spiritually. And what God does is he says, Joe, you're a slow learner. What I'm doing now is I'm just reaffirming that Joe McFadden cannot rest satisfaction if Joe McFadden manages well. And what I'm going to do is I sponsor way too many people. Clancy used to tell me, if anybody ever asks you, say one too few. Why? And then if they press you more, just say, about half of them. Why? And the reason why I sponsor so many people is to keep me out of trying to manage my own life. There's something called Hanlon's razor. A lot of people in here have read about Occam's razor. This is called Hanlon's razor. It's where you wake up and instead of being ignorant, you wake up and you've got the gift of discernment. And you know people are really slighting you. And that's where my default position. And alone and unaided, that's where I always default. And I've got to hook into that power. And what that power does, how he hooks in through me. How do you perfect and enlarge your spiritual life? Well, I would think a Bentley convertible would help my spiritual life. But it doesn't. I would think a Rolex watch with 18-karat pave face, barked, would be wonderful. But no, he says this: we perfect and enlarge our spiritual life through constant work and sacrifice for others and how we meet their needs. My sponsor read that to him and said, well, what about me? He says, Jesus, Joe, have you read your inventory? Haven't you done enough damage? Jesus. And so what he does is my phone will ring every day between 20 and 30 times from sponsees and people all over the world. And it's impossible for me to have gotten a spreadsheet and fit all those people in. But you see, we've entered the world of the Spirit, it tells us in step 10, and that's what that looks like. We're going beyond the confines of mere rational mind or rationalism, to quote Carl Jung, and we're in the world of the Spirit. God is outside of space and time. It doesn't fit with him. And so we're tapping into this power greater than ourselves, who will bring healing to any area of your life. The number one thing I got out of Alcoholics Anonymous was the first word and the first step and every step thereafter. And I define a spiritual awakening as whenever the whole world, selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of all our troubles. It doesn't say was. I suffer from alcoholism, not alcoholism. I get a daily reprieve contingent upon the maintenance of my spiritual condition, helping others. And what happens here is I look at that is where I, me, and my, the alcoholic opera, me, 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 me. When I, me, and my turns into that first word of the first step, we, us, and our. when all of a sudden the modus operandi of selfishness is self-centeredness is getting without giving. All of a sudden, I go to the spiritual principles. What are those spiritual principles that will solve all of our problems? A guy asked me that once in a workshop I did, and I didn't have an answer for him, but I got one today, and it's on page 128. Giving rather than getting becomes the guiding principle. That giving is where the getting is. I've yet to be with the sponsee at divorce court, and his soon-to-be ex-wife gets up there and, well, Your Honor, that SOB just cares too much about me and the kids. I've never heard that. See, the getting, everything that I found that I wanted in my life was given to me through these spiritual principles. That is the point of attraction rather than promotion. So I'm all over the place, but there's a lot of bases I want to cover. One time, because I was a setter, I went to special ed, but I found out I could excel in the sport of wrestling. I may have went to the Olympics, but Carter boycotted them that year. And the rich boys with the Corvette convertibles and the leather jackets and the cheerleader girlfriends called and asked me if I would come over, because they knew I knew how to work on motorcycles. Would you come over and help us put on the chain? I said, well, sure, I'd love to. So I'm going over there. The cheerleaders are there. They got a swimming pool. It's great. I've finally been accepted to the big time. And I go in there, and they're all out there at the garage drinking peach tea. They gave it to me, and the maid brought out an egg salad sandwich for me. It was great. And they said, all right, fix this for us, Joe. And I said, all right, great. I fixed it, and I'm thinking I'm going to be in with the in crowd. And they say, you sure the chain won't go off? They said, why don't you drive it to make sure? And I did it, and I did wheelies looking at the girls and everything, and I sat down and everything. They say, yeah, it's not going to come off now. I said, let me tighten up one more time. After I got that last one, they all came up to me. They said, get the hell out of here. You think we'd have a spaz, retarded white trash like you be friends with us? And they started laughing. If it was one or two of them, I may have fought them, but I couldn't fight the whole thing. So I leave. And what I leave with is this, is that they saw the truth about who I am and what I am. They saw that my mama was right about me. And I cut through a graveyard. And when I cut through that graveyard, I looked around at that cemetery. And I saw on that hot August day all these people dead. And I thought about the person who had just been buried there, and they hadn't put the sod on yet. And I said how maggots is going to be eating his body in a few days, but the maggots right now are eating my spirit. And I think that's what alcoholism is, minus the physical aspects of it, which I'll get into. And as I go through that, I find out this, as I hear some hooping and hollering, and it's my cousin, and they're there, and they stole from old man Mahoney's garage some 3-2 beer, and they had it getting cold in the creek. And I walk up there, and they say, hey, have a drink. And I said, no, I'm not going to be like Uncle Jink, Uncle Virgil, all of them, Grandma, they're all alcoholics, they died drinking, and I'm not going to do it. But I did it. And immediately I felt euphoric omnipotence. I was no longer a stutterer with no dad, a mistake. My parents were movie stars. I was really smart. My acne fell from my face. And before, if I'd asked a girl at Teen Town to dance and she'd said no, you'd had to call suicide prevention. After I took that first drink, if she told me no, I would feel sorry for her. And I found the elixir for my life. And I took it. And I drank and I drank and I drank. I felt that euphoric omnipotence. And little did I know that was alcoholism. And I'll explain in a second how that kicked in. And I felt euphoric omnipotence, and the fatal progressive nature of alcoholism is such as that it would go on and on over. Any time we get worse, never better. Once you become a pickle, you can never be a cucumber. And I got down to there. And then I would bounce back up, and I'd say, I met a girl whose daddy owned a car dealership. The part of Kansas City I grew up, that's the definition of love at first sight. and I married her, and I put that family through hell. You see, because I had a tiger by the tail, and that was alcoholism. I didn't know that I was suffering from a fatal malady. I didn't know that from the doctor's opinion and Bill's story all the way up to page 23, what it explained is that I had a physical allergy that sets me aside from any other class of drinker as a distinct entity. Once I took the drink took me. I did not understand that. And I was drinking to overcome this allergy. And whenever I would go into treatment centers and come back out, I would drink again. Why did I do that? It's because from page 23 to page 43, it talks about the more serious part. You see, if the answer to alcoholism was you have a physical aspect, you put it in your body, you manifest the phenomenon of craving, every detox in the country would produce winners, and we all know that detox recidivism rate is worse than almost anything. I suffer from something neat where it says at the top of page 23, these observations would be academic and pointless if the alcoholic didn't take the first drink, thereby setting this terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem centers in his mind rather than in his body. What I found out is that I suffer from a mental obsession. Is that I only have, our dear friend Charlie Parker would say, I only have two problems with alcohol, when I'm drinking it and when I'm not drinking it. Other than that, I have no problem with alcohol. And that's true, you see. And then here's the second half of the first step. My life is unmanageable. See, trying to manage either area, it's unmanageable by me. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. And before I could take the second step, I had to take negative step 2. What's negative step 2? Is I had to come and believe in the hopelessness and futility of existence the way that I've been living it. And then they asked me this. I'm not saying that God could. I'm just saying, do you believe that? I'm not saying he would. I'm just trying to get you, Joe, to say that perhaps he could. He's done it for those other people. And I couldn't get past that. So I'd always go out to drink. And then here's the deal. I went in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. I went through a succession of meeting women, having babies. I have 3 children. And then taking a geographic, going to a different city, a different deal, and it was always somebody else's fault, never mine. And then finally I reached my bottom, and I was in that state hospital. They sent me back to the state hospital, and I met Dr. Albert Cullen, and he said, what are we going to do? And I said, don't send me back to Alcoholics Anonymous. It doesn't work for people like me. They get sober and they go to PTA meetings and marry fat women that they think are Dolly Parton, and they're too stupid to realize how miserable they are. And so he says, we're going to do that. 81 days, 37 shock treatments, I get out. Now, whenever they did the shock treatments, I had no motor skills. I would just sit there. I'd hear people talking, but I could not translate what they were saying. I couldn't make my voice talk. And I remember after they give you the shock treatments, they strap you down, wet you up, put all this all over your body, and they shock the hell out of you. And I was just hoping that would work. I remember going to see Kate Holy, and I love and venerate the people who are good two-hatters. And this was a two-hatter. Her name was Kate Holy. And Sandy asked me to speak down in Pinellas County at the intergroup. And I hadn't seen her for like 20-some years. And she was sitting in the front row when I told the story. And little did I know she was there. And she came up to me after that. We're friends on Facebook. She worked for MHMR, and she was there at the state hospital. And she goes, Joe, I don't want to hear that AA doesn't work, number one. Number two, you can't come back in to my therapy sessions here at the hospital. I've seen you going in and out of Club 12 trying to pick up girls and stuff. You were glassy-eyed, you were stoned. You can't say AA it doesn't work because you don't know. You never got a sponsor. You never read the big book. You never took the steps. You just came there because you're a loser, you're a taker, you're an abuser, and you're pathetic. And you're not coming in here because people like you are sociopaths, tendencies. Just learn better ways to hustle people. Now get out of here. And she goes, the only hope for you is I have a phone number right here. You call him. And it was Jim Willis. And for some reason, I opened myself to the grace of God that day, and I called him. And he said, Joe, you bought a lie about yourself. And this is where I got it, what I shared earlier, is you bought a lie about yourself, of who you are, the world you live in, and what the people in it are. And you bought the two lies. You always knew that you were of more value and smarter than you were ever able to demonstrate. And the second set is that you always knew you wanted to love and be loved more than you were ever able to give or receive. He goes, and that's exactly where the rubber meets the road in Alcoholics Anonymous. If you care to, and this is the only way it'll work for people like you and me. When he said people like you and me, you know, I've had education about alcoholism, information about alcoholism, but that's not what Alcoholics Anonymous is about. Alcoholics Anonymous isn't about education or information. It's about identification. For once, I was inside. And he says, I'll take you where you will have a transformation. People come to Alcoholics Anonymous can change, don't make it. You come to Alcoholics Anonymous if you can't change, and you take the 12 surrenders of Alcoholics Anonymous to be changed. My fulcrum of my life hinged on that. And so he says, this is a non-starter. I will take you through the 12 surrenders of Alcoholics Anonymous as long as you agree to take everyone, to transform everything you receive from my higher power through me to you. You agree to base the rest of your life on doing the same likewise with others. For some reason, I said yes. And I got out, and he introduced me to a man named Cersei, who was friends with Bill, and they took me through the 12 steps. A doctor up here, Dr. Robinson, who was with the MHMR, she came and she met with them, and she went to court, and I went from the state of Texas MHMR to my sponsor, went to court and signed papers, and I became a ward of my sponsor. I took the 12 steps, and then I said, hey, I'm on SSI. God's given me the promise. I can 12-step all the time. And he goes, no, you're on the government tit. You're a leech. We have a 7th tradition. You're a AA bum. We work. Jim, I really suffer from depression, and I feel crappy most of the time. He goes, well, get a depressing, crappy job, but you're going to work. And little by little, and I'm not going to leave you with the that it happened overnight. He says, you know how to treat a newcomer at their first meeting, and you know the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, when I was in that state hospital at about 5 o'clock in the morning, this big guy come in, big old black guy, scary. He'd say, go over there. There was all of us indigents living in this ward. He'd say, feet on the floor, mother. I won't finish it. And then he'd come up to you and say, hey. Yeah, you. Where's your feet? Here. You be here. And it never made sense, but that's what my sponsor, Jim Willis, would say. He would say, hey, you feet on the floor in the morning. You're here to serve God. And your job is to make God look good. He goes, that's your job when you go. You are the GSR for your home group at this job. My marriage, I'm the GSR for my home group to my wife. My job is to make her look good. My job is to make my employer look good. My job is to make my sponsees look good. My job is to make my home group look good. With this attitude, the big book says you cannot fail, and I'm here to tell you a few things about that and how it's worked in my life. Is I went through, and they went to the court and got me out, and I started working, and I didn't know anything. And one of the things that happened during that time is Jim wasn't a really big book guy. And I was listening with this guy, and y'all remember, God rest his soul, Ed Laugy. I suffer from this spiritual malady. And he had like 300 amends to make. And he met this guy, and he was coming back, and I'm saying, man, this page 52, the spiritual malady is just killing me. Jesus, he goes, well, we must go up to Kerrville and meet Mark Houston. And I started listening to his tapes, and I go over there, and I meet Joe Hawk, who was speaking at the Law Hall anniversary, and I meet him, and he says, dude, we got to get you through the steps, out of the big book. The wrong information in your hands would be deadly. And he says, and we've got to see the truth in your lie in order for you to see the lie in your truth. I'm still trying to put that together. But what I did is I went through the steps with Joe and Mark out of the big book. And there was I got honest with them. In fact, I'm glad both of them are dead, because I told them things I never told anybody. And not seriously, I don't feel that way, but what we did is I went through the steps, and people saw a big difference in me. And what we did is people were coming up to me when I was the guy that your sponsor would say, you stay away from him. They'd say, hey, go up and talk to him. Well, I met Joe and Mark had just gotten out of a nervous breakdown from his PTSD and a divorce. And then Joe had gotten out of a prison for something, but he was sober, and we all said we need to get through this, and we went through what they called the work. And by the way, I believe we take the steps so we can do the work. The work is in the trenches helping alcoholics. When we take the steps, that's the steps, that's not the work. And so we started something. We called ourselves the Truth Seekers. I got 81 people that saw the difference that transpired up here in Kerrville, not far from here. And there were 81 of us. And Joe said, hey, listen, I sponsor a guy named Danny Sherman. We called Danny, and Danny sent me the manuscripts of what is now called the Big Book Awakenings. And 81 of us took all 12 steps as a group together. We believed that we believed that reading the big book was a waste of time. We believed that studying the big book was a waste of time until and unless we were going to do the big book. And we did that as a group. And to date, 33 years later, of the 81 of us, 67 of us are either still alive or died sober. Now, why is that an important figure? We don't take records in Alcoholics Anonymous, but the closest we have is in the foreword to the second edition, where it says, of those who came, who sincerely tried, and we could talk another hour on that, 50% sobered up immediately, 25 eventually, and the other 25 over time showed remarkable improvement. Now, if you take 67 into 81, you will come up with the exact same figures of 75% recovery. You see, it's in the big book because it's not true. It's not true because it's in the big book. So I started working. I'm going to wrap it up here in a few minutes. I started working. Mark Houston and I, we rekindled our friendship. He had a little facility out in Manor. He asked me to come over there, and I did the big book study up there for a few years. After he had passed, I sponsored a lot of the people that he sponsored after he passed. But one of the things he had me do is I spoke at his anniversary, and a guy there comes up and asked me if I would sponsor him. I said, sure, kid, when you get out. I don't want to say anything that's going to interfere with the things they're teaching you here. And so he did, and then all of a sudden you find out he's in this big business and he knows these famous people in business. And anyway, I make him manage halfway houses. I said, they ought to be paying you ought to be paying them $80,000 a year, learning how to live life on spiritual principles with all these people. Anyway, he gets a job offer, and I said, well, yeah, but you got to give a 2-week notice to Mark. So he does that. And he ends up being in this business. And it's a big business, and I'm not going to mention names or anything. And they said, hey, he wants to know if I could hire you because I need an assistant, and we're going to be drilling a lot of oil wells, and I need somebody to help. And he says that I could hire you if that is going to help him stay sober. But little did I know, the guy told him he could hire me on a 2-week trial period, and that turned into 11 years. And how did I excel? And I went further up than this guy in the business. I treated everyone like a newcomer at their first meeting, and every client I operated under giving rather than getting being the guiding principle, because I believe what Emerson wrote, the dice of God are loaded, you can't outgive God. And then I would walk by and I would apply the 12 traditions in every one of those affairs. I would walk by this Texas billionaire's office. Now in his office, he's got a picture of both George W. and George H. Bush holding up his book in the Oval Office. That's the kind of swaggiest guy. He walked by, Joe McFadden, get your ass in. And I go in there and says, tell these boys what your job is. Yes, sir. From the time my feet hit the floor in the morning to the time I go to sleep, I got one job, to make my new employer look good. That's why this SOB's going places in this company. Our dark past becomes our greatest asset, right? So I did that. Well, and I remember, if you were to get this book called 1,000 Years of Recovery, the second story in it is about a very dear friend who took me to my very first international conference. His name was Bill Dooner. And Bill got sober in 1955, and Bill Wilson was his sponsor. And he ended up 12-stepping Betty Ford, and he was got appointed by Jerry Ford as ambassador to the United Nations. And I think he was influential in my son getting into politics, because my son runs the White House press corps now. And what he always told me, he says, Joe, the ideas are so simple, as alcoholics overlook them. He goes, God really takes care of us. And so what Bill did is, at his home group, there was a guy surveying. There was another guy who was taking down old telephone poles and putting up new ones. And then there was another one tearing down buildings and had all this. And they had all this excess. And he got this idea that he would rent for $10 for 100 years, a 10-foot by 10-foot piece of real estate in the middle of somebody's farm. They thought he was crazy. Everybody's calling, hey, get this guy. Well, what they didn't know is he knew his home group member had the survey of where the road was going in for the big freeway, LaGuardia Freeway. And he went over there, and then they got those telephone poles and they put in, and then he and Ellie would go at night with the wood that they got from the other guy, and they would put up billboards. And he retired. His condo was beneath Ted Turner's in Atlanta. When he retired, he had 80,000 of those boards. And when I was driving, I had this idea and in my head for years, and I would talk to Lucy about nothing about it. But I heard Bill say, Joe, go talk to the most powerful man at the Capitol in Austin about it. And I go in there, and they say, I'm sorry, he's in session, you can't see him. And then all of a sudden, I see this lady vehemently crying. And I go up, say, what's wrong? She goes, my best friend I've had my whole life was just died in a horrible car wreck. And I sat there, and I did what us alcoholics do. We helped other people. And I taught her a prayer, and I wrote it down, and she has it framed in her office there. I taught her the I am the place prayer. I am the place where God shines through. He and I are one, not two. I need not worry, fret, or plan. He wants me where and as I am. And if I be relaxed and free, he will carry out his plan through me. And she goes, thank you very much, Mr. McFadden. I'll be right back. And she comes back with this man. He says, you be here at my office at 5:30 p.m. when I'm out of session, and I'll take care of you. And I won't get into details, but I got a law introduced. We started a company. Lucy and I sold it, and we're able to devote the rest of our life with Al-Anon and AA. We have it full volume in our home. We have some ranches in West Texas. We have a home, and everywhere we go is Alcoholics Anonymous, the music of that playing. Now, after this became law, I got invited out to a guy's ranch. He was having a big party, and this is where a lot of the chief justices go to spend their time and stuff, and these are all big shots. But this PBS reporter wanted to do a interview of me, so I told her, I said, I'll be at this ranch tonight. So I called and so anyway, she came and she met me. And when I was there, I'm walking in, and this guy says, you look familiar, the owner of the ranch. I said, well, my picture's in every post office bulletin board. And he starts laughing. He says, no, I know who you are. You see, Frank Jones was in the Academy Award-winning movie Nebraska with Bruce Dern. He was the secretary of the world's largest AA meeting, the Pacific Group, and he was a member of SAG, and we became very close. And he died and asked me to do his eulogy at his funeral, which I did. And Frank was a war hero. and in Vietnam. And he says, no, you did Frank Eulogy's funeral. He goes, would you sit at the head table with me and my wife? It would be my honor. So I brought the lady up with me, who was interviewing me there, and we go up there. And, when I was in that state hospital, if you could have told me whenever they'd take me upstairs at the 3rd floor in the acclimating room where I couldn't do anything, and I'm just looking out there, and I'd see this young couple with horses in a swimming pool, teaching their 2 beautiful little girls how to ride horses and swing. I look out there at those 37 shock treatments, said, why didn't I end up there? I'm a good boy. Why did this happen? So anyway, and then here I am sitting at this guy, these titans of industry at the table with them being interviewed. And I'm sitting there, and I'm next to this guy. I won't mention who he is or what his role was. It'd be a giveaway. But this politician you see on TV all the time. And he says, and then the owner comes up, this guy's telling you about that law. And he says, hey, can I get your phone number? And I said, yeah. And I said, where do you live? And he told me. I said, I know where you live. And he goes, really? And I described his house. And he goes, like, oh my God, he's going to think I'm a stalker. And so he says, how do you know where I live? And I said, my wife and I love the neighborhood. You have the best house in the neighborhood. He says, well, thanks. I said, we were looking, but we couldn't afford to buy over there. And I covered my tracks. Well, after the dinner was over and everything, I drive 11 and a half miles up to the state highway where you can get internet. And I called Jim at home, my sponsor, and I'm crying. And he says, why are you crying? And I told him what had just happened. He goes, hey, look, politicians will always ask for your phone number if they think you have money, of course. I said, no, the lie. He goes, well, why'd you lie to him? I said, well, here's the deal. Is when I was on that 3rd floor acclimating after getting all those shock treatments, I was sitting at the table with those 2 young ladies and the husband and wife who was the politician. That's the table I'm sitting at with these people. Now you see, if Alcoholics Anonymous can do that for me, if you jump all the way in, the water is fine. Bring us your sickest, darkest secret. We know the truth about you. Buy our lie about you so you can too, like Joe Hawk taught me, see the truth in your lies so that you can see the lie in your truth. Now, my question to you is, if God did that for an idiot, blooming idiot like me, and my wife will give you volumes of testimony about that truth of that statement, what the hell can he do it for geniuses like you? Now, I'd like to close with this story, and it's simply this. There was a greatest circuit speaker. Clancy said this guy, he died drunk though, and his name was Jack Odom in San Antonio. And he used to tell his story, and it was this, is that there was a general whose job was, whenever there was someone who committed a crime and they were going to have to be executed by court-martial, like treason or something, he would go in there the night before and he would talk to them, and he'd say, hey, listen, we're going to give you a dinner of your choice, we're going to give you a hot bath, and then we're going to let you get a good night's sleep, and then we're going to come in and we're going to read what you've been found guilty by a jury of your peers, and then we're going to handcuff you behind your back, we're going to take you out, we're going to blindfold you, and then we're going to execute you by virtue of a firing squad. That's what we're going to do. Now tonight, after we leave you with your bath and your dinner, there's a door at the end of your cell. You can go out that door and accept the consequences thereof, or stay here and accept the consequences thereof. And every day that they came back when they had an execution, the prisoner was always there. And this was the last time this sergeant was going to see the general because he was retiring. He says, General, sir, with your permission, I'd like to ask you something. What is on the other side of that door that so many people are afraid of? And he goes, freedom, but very, very few people have the courage to take that door open and walk out. So my asking you is, do you have the courage, spiritual courage, to go all in and let God take you to something brighter than your wildest dreams? Thank you.